All right. Yeah. Location. So, my name is Evan Strong, and I make a lot of content on our clothing, our shoelaces, the way that we tie them and lace them, and the way that those two things especially play into our natural body mechanics and having easy, normal rotation, left and right, internal and external, and having a natural center line, right, as a human being, functioning the way that we would until we place clothing on our body and our feet inside of shoes that pull them out of their natural position. So, one thing I'm going to talk about, the point of this video, is hanging our clothing. Now, it doesn't matter if you dry your clothing first and then hang it up, or if you just hang your clothing to dry. Either way, when we hang our clothing, a lot of times people don't pay attention to the way that they set their clothing on the hanger, because we have shoulder seams within our clothing and they look different depending on the type of shirt or whatever upper that goes on our torso, whether it's a jacket, a hoodie, a cardigan, a coat, a t-shirt, a long sleeve shirt, a button up, no matter what it is. The way that the shirt sits on that hanger, it gets ingrained in that hanger, especially if it's wet and it dries that way. But even if it's dry and it's just hanging, the weight of the hanging of the shirt sits on the crest of that hanger, and it kind of separates that material, even if it's not stretchy. So, as I say with any and all of my content on any kind of thing you ever put on your body, even your shoes, take the tags out. They are usually made out of a synthetic man-made material, which your body, sensory-wise, will try to reject. So let's say there's one in the center of the back of my shirt. Instead of being able to stand proper and move and operate normal with good internal rotation, it'll cause a little bit of a gap there that puts you into, as I mention all the time, this chronic state of external rotation that most people in 2024 are in, until we address these things. And it's a very simple fix. So, not just these things, but the things that I cover within my content. So, when we hang our clothing on a hanger, we need to be intentional about where we set the hanger within our clothing, in the shoulder seams, or if we're hanging pants. I'm going to touch on pants, but the biggest one is the upper clothing, right? Because it affects our head position, our shoulder position, our spine curvature, our breathing patterns. It affects all that. So, as I've mentioned also in my other content, I would recommend, and I do for myself as much as I can, getting 100% materials. So if your shirt's made out of cotton, have it be 100% cotton rather than a blend of materials. Because if you start blending this material with this material, weaving it together in the stitch, this material could stretch more than this one, and so it will react differently when you're wearing it, and it'll shrink differently, even if you never put it inside of a washing machine or a dryer, just throughout heat or sweat on your body, whatever it is. So in addition to that, try to have natural materials, because as I mentioned, with just a tag that's about, this size maybe, if your entire shirt is woven with some polyester, for example, a complete man-made plastic that's on your entire body, and your body can't reject something that's always sitting on it. So when it comes to hanging your shirts, I brought a few examples here that are hanging on this pipe. This is actually a scoreboard for this baseball field. We need to be very intentional about trying to keep them even, left to right, as far as where the shoulder seams sit on the hanger, and forward and back. Because if your shoulder seams come in front of your shoulders at all, it puts you into external rotation, and it kind of feels as though you're falling backward, but really what it looks like is you're falling forward, because you have to stay vertical, whether you're sitting or standing. So you'll fall into external rotation rather than internal. I talk about following your thumbs, right? Internal rotation, active, mobile, capable, natural. External rotation, it's like you have no stability, okay? So, I'm going to first show this shirt here. This shirt, I've talked about these specific shirts for the sake of their collar, right? One even collar all the way around with no like cut and seam within the collar. This is what I would recommend for myself and everybody anytime that we can get it. Just one even collar all the way around without a seam somewhere within it. And I will explain why that is. But for the sake of showing a good position for the hanger to sit, when there's no seam in the collar, then the collar reacts the same all the way around. Okay, so if we put the hanger just barely in front of the shoulder seam, right? This side over here is the front of the shirt, right? So the hanger is just slightly, just very slightly in front of those shoulder seams. That allows them to sit just right behind the top of our shoulders, which puts our shirt in a position that lets our body be in its natural internal rotation and standing vertical and operating well as a human being. So it's very important. Okay, yes. So this shirt here, and I've shown this specific shirt as an example before. It has what I was talking about with this collar seam. So I've shown what to do with that and what I personally do, which is follow from the top here, right along the seam, follow it down to where it meets this band that becomes the shoulder seam, and make just a little tiny, with scissors, I have scissors right here, little tiny slit right there in the top, like lip, if you will. There's the bottom lip and the top lip of this band that goes around. Just cut it right where that seam meets that. And that allows it to kind of sit against your neck and to be more even. And I've gone into pretty good depth of what that does to your body, that little seam, and how it's really actually bad, if I'm just being frank, because it allows that side, which it's generally the left side, where that seam is, to open up, and your trap, sensory wise, not intellectually, your body does it by itself, will try to find where that opening is, because everything else all the way around is laying flat against your neck except for where that seam is, and it'll drop this right shoulder. Overactive left trap is what you'll end up with, and it'll put you into the same position that the shoelacing and other things that I show within clothing places you into. So the things which I show in my content that are very simple how to correct our imbalances and get us centered and even, this is a must. Do that little snip within the shirts that you have that seam, but ideally, if you can, get shirts that just don't have that collar seam. So I'm going to show a little bit about what that collar seam can potentially do when it's on a hanger, because when I make that slit, it allows it to kind of go down, because like I'm saying, this seam will feel like it's off of your neck because it's thicker there, and so it's trying to open up. So a lot of times that'll make it sit on a hanger either farther back or farther forward on the side with that seam, and it won't naturally sit even left to right. So that slit will allow it to then be more uniform around the back. So yes, okay, do you see how it's just right in front of those shoulder seams evenly? Because then the material will kind of be in a position where it wants to stay there after it's been hanging on the hanger, and when you place it on you, then your body can more easily be in its natural position. So we need to focus on that. I know that it seems a little bit, to some people, specific, and I, for years, didn't really pay attention when I put my clothing on the hangers, whether it was actually drying there or just putting it there to store it in the closet. But it's a very necessary thing to focus on. It really is. So another thing is the width of the actual hanger. If it's going farther out than the edge of the shoulder seam, then it's gonna potentially kind of wear in a pattern, as I was saying, that we're trying to intend on happening, but it's gonna do it farther out. So then you might put your shirt on the hanger and it's like this, and then when you put that shirt on your body, it's going to want to fall to the side that it's been like stretched into, in a sense, being on the hanger. So if you can, ideally within the hangers that you already have, try to find hangers that will stop right at the edges of the shoulder seams. Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to pants, that's also an importance when it comes to putting them on a hanger. A lot of people will fold the pants and kind of put them through the hanger, but if you're gonna use those clip hangers right on the waistline of the pant, in order to get into internal rotation, which is a natural position that most humans in 2024 are not even able to get into, the things which I talk about in my content being a huge reason as to why, the waistline of our pants needs to be even with the back in the front, or a little bit higher in the front than in the back, because to internally rotate our femurs, our hips have to be in a little bit of a posteriorly rotated position to open up, right? Internal rotation is an open position. I'm on the balls of my feet right now. It's an open position to allow for mobility and elevation of the shoulders. It's an opening where the scapulas wrap up and around the rib cage to open it. So when you hang pants on a hanger, if you're going to use the clip hangers, one side of that clip is fixed to the hanger and the other side hinges open and closed with a little like spring, in a sense, to grip it, right? So the part that moves, right, because you'll have this side fixed, you'll put that part that moves on, I can't speak for all hangers, but on the front of the pants, because that way, as the pants either dry, if they're hanging starting from being wet, or just the weight of the pants hanging, that'll pull the front of the pants up, slight, but enough that when it sits around your waist, because the point being, it'll do the opposite if you do it the opposite way, and that if it does anything at all, if you're doing it incorrectly, it's gonna put your hips in the position we don't want. So you want those clips to be to where, if anything, it's pulling the front of the pants up, because that will tuck your pelvis posteriorly and allow your femurs to rotate in. I have content on my shoelacing and tying technique, and that is a prerequisite to anything else that I talk about, because that's the foundation of your body, tying your shoes over to the inside to allow for even internal rotation, and lacing them to allow room for your arches naturally, so your feet can work naturally. So that's all I'm going to cover as far as hanging clothing, but it's very important because it can potentially pull your entire body out of alignment if your shoulder seams have been sitting on a hanger, causing a patterning that's not even left to right. Okay, my name's Evan Strong. It's the 17th of August, 2024. I make content on clothing, shoelacing, and things like this. So stick around for more. Thank you.